Everyone, my name is Michelle Bezanson, and I'm a professor at Santa Clara University. I want to start by thanking you for joining us today, and this is the last of 3 webinars in the series Biological Anthropology and COVID-19. We want to start by giving a big pile of thank yous to the chairs of the Committee on Student Programs, the Committee on Professional Development, the Committee on Diversity, and the Biological Anthropology Women's Mentoring Network for developing these 3 topics. We also want to thank the AAPA's new virtual program committee for implementation. I really want to say I think it is programs like these and everyone here today and in the audience that make me feel very lucky to be a part of this professional community. I don't see this going on elsewhere, so this is really cool. And so we're going to learn today about the multiverse of possibilities with a PhD in biological anthropology. We'll learn about career possibilities, and for those of us that mentor undergraduates and graduate students, we might have the opportunity to think about mentoring and to think about professional development. We will have time for questions afterwards, so please think about what you want to ask or what you may want to contribute to this conversation. Thank you, and let's get started.
Let me jump in real quick to tell people how they can ask the questions. So as you're, for all of the attendees, just type into your GoToWebinar control panel questions section, type in your questions, and at the end, after the last presenter, I'll then read the questions to the presenter. Some of you might want your name to be anonymous when you ask the question. If you want your name to, if you don't want me to read your name, just type anon or something like that at the beginning of your question, at the beginning of the text of your question, and I won't read out your name. That's it.
Okay. So, shall I begin? Thank you very much to Brett and to Michelle, and thank you to everyone who's participating, who was interested in today's topic. A bit about myself. I'm a chemist by training. I trained at the University of Cape Town in synthetic organic chemistry, but I had always had a very keen interest in history, and at some point I realized how very ignorant I was about the history of Cape Town, and particularly the history of slavery in Cape Town. So I had to think of a way in which, when pursuing my PhD studies, a way in which I could use my scientific background in a way that could help me understand historical questions. This came in the form of using isotopic systems applied to human remains of enslaved persons at the colonial Cape. And I also complemented this with a bit of archival research in the quite extensive Dutch East India Company archive in Cape Town and in The Hague in the Netherlands. So this is what this was how my project looked at the Free University of Amsterdam, where I graduated at the end of 2018, and I currently am a postdoc part-time postdoc at the Forensic Anthropology Research Center of the University of Pretoria, and I'm also a part-time assistant curator for Iziko Museums South Africa in Cape Town. And as you can tell, I have one foot in academia and one foot out of academia, and this was quite a conscious decision that I made, primarily because I'm not really built for the lab. So had I stayed in traditional academia, I would be doing a lot more lab work than what I'd be happy with. So that was one reason I chose to kind of take these 2 paths. And another reason was because I was just intrigued and excited about the possibilities of the skills that I would learn as a museum professional. So these were my two main reasons that I kind of have a foot in and a foot out of academia. And I guess another reason is that I found during my PhD that I'm really comfortable in a multidisciplinary space. So at any given time, I'll know less than somebody who has studied bioanthropology solely, or somebody who studied history solely. But yeah, it has its disadvantages, but it's a space in which I'm comfortable. And I think in terms of the skills that I've learned during my PhD, I think the most important has been the ability to communicate with different audiences. So I've spent time with historians and geoscientists and archaeologists and museum professionals. I've had to apply to heritage agencies to gain permission to sample destructively, to sample these human remains destructively. So that's really something that I had to be able to tell my story to different audiences in a way that made sense to them. And yeah, this skill set that I have, you wouldn't be wrong to say that you know, these skills are quite disparate, and you wouldn't be wrong to call me a jack of all trades. But somehow it's all come together in a way that works. I'm able to do research that I find very interesting, and I'm able to bring it to different kinds of people who, you know, if you have an interest, I'll tell you all about my research. So it's been an unconventional path, but I think also just this exposure to different fields has really been it's been beneficial to me, and I think that it's actually one of the reasons that I was considered as a hire for Ezekiel Museums, was because I had these, you know, different experiences and the ability to talk to different kinds of people. And I continue, amongst my tasks at the museum, I continue to do research. My current project is about diet and migration during the industrialization of South Africa. So that's in the second half of the 19th century. But I have other tasks as well and responsibilities. I also am involved in community outreach, and of course I have to make exhibitions once in a while. So that's me in a nutshell. And you'll hear from me again in the Q&A section. So I think it's Luke's turn now.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, so I'm Luke Matthews. I'll run down the same items about myself that Linda just took us through. So my kind of personal history is that I'm a Ph.D. in anthropology, in biological anthropology. I was Tony DeFiori's graduate student when he was at NYU, and then I was a postdoc of Charlie Nunn while he was at Harvard. I studied social networks and the diffusion of behaviors in capuchin monkeys at Tony's site in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So as a primatologist. When I was Charlie's postdoc, after doing that, I went to work for a startup social network analytics company that mainly sold basically network analysis for marketing purposes in the healthcare space. In not just drug launches, but hospital system management and hospitals competing in their markets. We did a bit of organizational consulting as well. The theory and methods that I had been doing translated pretty well. I just needed to get used to working with much larger data sets, and sometimes you need to code differently for that. So, but it was really just the same theory and methods as I had been doing. It's just it wasn't monkeys anymore. It was like, people interacting on email servers and kind of doctors swapping patients and stuff like that. And then after being at Activate for a while, we, like a lot of startups, moved into a mode where we were just doing the same product again and again, looking to get acquired, which, like most companies, we were acquired at a loss on the investment, right? So that's why I'm still working. Basically, once we moved into that mode, there was no research and development going on anymore. And I like doing research. I'm a researcher, right? So it kind of became uninteresting in that sense. I really like the people I worked with. But I could see that, we weren't going to get acquired with a big payout, and we weren't doing R&D. So I started looking for a place where I could do research, but that maybe the research was kind of partway back to academia, meaning that the research wasn't always oriented towards something we can sell 6 months down the line, right? So a little more open-ended, where I'd have some control over what I'm researching and could keep doing research. And so I applied several places, and I was able to get a job at Rand Corporation, where I am now. I'm a senior behavioral and social scientist at Rand Corporation now. And Rand is a nonprofit research institute that mainly works for the federal government on contracts and grants that the government has topics they want to see researched. Yeah, and that I call Rand kind of like 50% of the way back to academia. So I don't publish as much as an academic. I have to, whatever research projects I'm doing, I always have to pretty much support them with some kind of extramural funding. So that's a little bit different. And we have access to certain kinds of contracts that aren't traditional research grants, where it's like a very specific question the government wants to answer, like evaluate how timely are veterans getting care in the Veterans Health Administration, that kind of question. Why I decided to shift from academia, honestly, I was, in my case, there's maybe 3 factors. One, I didn't think that the kind of primatology I was interested in doing, I was ever going to really get funded. Simultaneously, number 2, I started doing more human research, including some applied research. And I was like, well, if I'm going to work on humans, maybe I want to do applied work. I was getting a pretty good reaction from people to that, like a better reaction maybe than my primate research. And 3, there's probably like personal factors. I had, in my postdoc, already had my first child, and I had other postdoc offers that involve, moving to other countries or really long distance kind of relocations within the States. And, I think for some of us, once you have kids, that priority changes a little bit. So the industry route opens up, I think, just more jobs within any geographic area. I still, so in my current position, I still do use, like, again, some of the same theory and methods as I used to use. I've acquired a lot of additional skills. So like in industry type settings, I think Linda hinted at this, you kind of continue to acquire additional skills that often can be kind of divergent from what you're originally trained in, because you kind of learn what you need to get a project done. So, I mean, how do you do that? You just, get a book, take a look. It's a reading rainbow. I mean, so like I actually teach at our grad school. Rand has a small grad school. Like I teach some machine learning classes there. I never took a single class on machine learning. I really didn't learn it till after I got into industry. But I would interact with other people doing it in industry, and I read some books, and I just started doing it. And then I want to comment on how practically you make these shifts, and I think some others will comment on other experiences they had. My initial shift out, what I recommend to people is, like in a lot of places in industry, they really care about the skills you have and what you can do. Certainly smaller employers that really have to compete for good employees. So like the Googles of the world or whatever, I mean, they can get whoever they want, right? So, it's for someone like me who is transitioning from doing primates, it's maybe a little harder. But a lot of places, like I got hired at a startup, like they didn't particularly care that I'd worked on network analysis in monkeys and religious groups at that point, right? Like if I could do the skills they wanted, then we can just swap in doctors and email servers and just do that, right? So, and people are like very open-minded in that way. I mean, in a sense, more open-minded than you find, sometimes in academia where things are kind of siloed within these disciplines. And that's just the nature of the structure. So you got to emphasize the skills that you have and connect them to what they're doing. A lot of subject matter stuff you can kind of learn on the job, I think. Sometimes, I mean, to learn everything about healthcare medical claims, I mean, that takes a long time, but like within a couple months, you can learn pretty much what you need to know about healthcare medical claims to do marketing in medical claims data. But like for me to teach somebody network analysis, like, well, they should go to school and learn some network analysis. Like that's not something I can do in 2 months. So that's like how I would characterize the practical shift. You do have to kind of, definitely like try to meet whoever you can. So at the time I kind of made that initial shift, some of the consultant type consultancies like BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and McKinsey, they already had kind of programs that were kind of to streamline people from academia kind of going into that. And then like more like the startup and small company scene is more like going to be people or local meetup groups, other types of like ways that kind of tech people organize. And it's not all coding. There's also jobs like in kind of, if you can do, kind of like structured interviewing or those kinds of slightly more qualitative tasks. There's a lot of work in that kind of space too. And that's some of my work at RAND now. So I'll stop there and we'll go to the next person, which I think is Mary.
Okay, are you able to hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'll also kind of tell you a little bit about my history to explain how I ended up where I am now. So my PhD was from University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. When I first started there, I actually was really interested in studying human genetics. I went to do some field work in West Africa with the Dogon people. I collected samples. It was all just happening according to plan, and then sort of had a disagreement with my advisor. And at first it was like everything was going to fall through. I was considering leaving grad school and what was I going to do. But after talking to some other committee members and supportive people in my department, I ended up switching to non-human primates. I study howlers now, where the professor whose site I went to study howlers was actually in a different department completely. It wasn't in anthropology, it was ecology and evolutionary bio. But I still had to have an anthropology advisor, so it was Milford Wolpoff, who some of you may know as a paleoanthropologist. So it was actually kind of nice because I learned to be resourceful, because with working with Liliana Cortez Ortiz on howlers, I learned a lot about genetics from her and field work. I didn't even see myself really as a non-human primatologist, like out there chasing monkeys. Now it's like my favorite thing. You can see there's a howler back there behind me. So, and then at the same time, I brought the component that she was missing in her research, which was the morphological stuff that is Milford's expertise. And so it was great, and I loved my dissertation. I used genetic markers and looked at morphology of hybrids. But when I first started, I really wanted training in next generation sequencing, looking at genomic data. But because of how everything went, I didn't really get to be in, let's say, one of those big labs where you had access to, both funding for that kind of analysis, but also just, general resources. And so if any of you are in that field, you know that sometimes being in the right lab kind of prepares you for getting a good postdoc, which then prepares you for getting a great job. So in this case, I wanted to continue into genomics, but found it hard to find a postdoc because they were all looking for people who already knew how to do the bioinformatics or had all of this, genomic lab experience. But I'm still fortunate to receive a postdoctoral fellowship, at University of Texas in San Antonio, but it was a teaching postdoc. So I took the position of another faculty member while they were gone. During that time, of course, I didn't really have my own or a PI's lab where I worked. So once again, I didn't really get to do genomics research. I still tried to be active, writing up data I had, but it was just, I started to lose momentum and was starting to really have this identity crisis. I'm like, wow, the dream I wanted to chase of being in a tier 1 research institution and doing all this cool stuff, like it's falling apart. I thought I was Professor Mary, and like it's looking like each consecutive year I was a little less attractive on the job market, right? And this is kind of personal, but I'd like to share the story because if you're there, trust me, you're not alone. I went into severe depression to the point that when my postdoc fellowship ended, I actually, left Texas, went back to Chicago where my parents live. I lived in my parents' house while I was hospitalized for depression. And my doctors, of course, saved my life and helped me regain some of my confidence to go back and explore options. And so I came back with full force, knowing that, okay, maybe I can't pursue my traditional route, but there may be some other options. Now, one difficulty I did encounter with getting industry type of positions is it's sort of some of those same issues kind of came back to haunt me, which is like if I wanted to work for any company that was doing genomics research, pharmacogenomics, for example, they still wanted to see evidence of that research. It's not like I didn't know how to do it. I had access to it. I read papers, I attended conferences. So, and I could even code. I learned a lot on my own as far as Luke said, like skills that you need. You learn a lot when you are a graduate student that you can use to market your CV. I even hired Karen Kelsey's group, the professor is in, to help me take my CV and turn it into like a really punchy resume, it was just so cool when they like finally actually put it together and gave it to me. I was like, wow, I would hire me. It was really awesome. But even that, I was able to maybe get like one interview, but I kept running into that same problem of, well, you just don't have the demonstrated experience in this field, even though you have a PhD. And sometimes there's also that stigma with, well, your PhD wasn't in biology, it's biological anthropology. Actually, it's just said anthropology. Long story short, I started to kind of lose heart, but I had the coping mechanisms and training to like not get really depressed about it. And I picked up some positions just adjuncting at different places in San Antonio. So even though I didn't have a job lined up, I came back to San Antonio and just wanted to try and make it on my own again to get some of that confidence back. And so I picked up this teaching gig, at St. Philip's College, where I am now, which is actually a community college, one of the Alamo colleges. And I did that for about 1.5 years, went broke because you know how the adjunct life goes. I taught at like 4 different schools and didn't have benefits and all that. But I got to learn a lot about St. Philip's, and I realized that they, what's cool about, community colleges is they've got like academic routes, but then they have the workforce training routes where they prepare you for a particular trade with unique skills. And my department in particular wanted to start a whole biotechnology program that prepares students for, directly transitions them into jobs in San Antonio where they're using specific skills in the biotechnology industry. And so I actually applied for this job to direct the program and sort of shape how it develops. And so it's, even though I am kind of in academia, I don't consider it a traditional route because, I have like a different kind of teaching load and I'm directing this workforce thing where it was specifically my experience, all the experience that I built up over the years in lab that came into play in designing this curriculum for this particular program and actually interfacing with local industry leaders in order to shape an advisory committee. That way we could actually get accreditation and have a successful program that will allow students, as soon as they finish their coursework, to get internships, and usually they get actually hired by those companies where they're interning when they finish their internship. So, you know, in the end, I'm like in my dream job because I am getting to sort of know what's happening locally in my community as far as availability of jobs in this area. I am still teaching. There are still funding mechanisms that send me and my students to Costa Rica right now, where I continue to study howlers. So I get to do it all. So I'm very fortunate. And just, you know, keep your head up. It works out. Thank you. So is Whitney next?
Hi, everyone. All right, so I'm Whitney Reiner, and I have a master's in biological anthropology, where I studied primate nutritional ecology with Jessica Rothman, and a PhD in integrative biology from UC Berkeley, where I studied with Leslie Alusco, and I studied human paleobiology. I focused on quantitatively analyzing human skull variation when I was at Berkeley. So now I'm a data scientist, and I work at in the ad tech space at a startup company called Ph.D. You know, at Ph.D, I build machine learning and optimization models. I communicate data science with the client-facing side of, you know, like the teams that work with the clients, and also I communicate with the clients sometimes. I develop new data visualizations for the client side of the UI and metrics, as well as visualizations to streamline the modeling process. So basically why I decided to go out of academia is, like, as you can tell, I did a master's and then a PhD, and before that I worked a few years after undergraduate. So the risk and overall timeline to start my career was a major factor. I wanted job security soon, and I wanted, you know, I didn't want to just move anywhere in the US, and I wanted to buy a house eventually and start a family. I wanted to get away from the politics of academia. I obviously I wasn't happy to get away from fieldwork. I love fieldwork, but, you know, if you have friends who still do fieldwork, you can always help them once in a while, depending on where they do the fieldwork. I really liked coding, which I, you know, learned how to do to analyze my dissertation data. And I thought data science would be a job that I would like, and also be able to have a career in that allowed me to work normal hours and not think about it on the weekends, you know, depending on what position I got. So obviously, like, I purposely did not go for a consulting job at a place like BCG that Luke Matthews was talking about, because that would be like academia again. You know, and I wanted to not be stressed and feel guilty if I wasn't working every moment of my free time. You know, academia kind of trains you to feel that way, even if, like, your advisor doesn't. Academia overall does. And I was like, okay, well, I've done that, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm ready to not feel that way anymore. So basically, after I finished, I had realized, you know, I want to do data science, but I don't know Python. I mostly work in R, and I need to learn more machine learning. So there were a lot of months of me, like, working full time on my own in, like, self-directed learning of Python and machine learning and more intensive statistical analyses. And then I got accepted into the Insight Data Science Fellowship, which is really awesome. Even, like, people with MDs who decide they don't want to be doctors do it. People with PhDs in all different fields do it. So what it is basically a fellowship that helps people in academia who have PhDs transition to jobs in industry in data science. They, I think, also have engineering fellowships now too, and specifically for, like, the health sciences. So that was definitely a game changer because it gave me, like, practical experience to do a data science project from beginning to end, so that I wasn't just saying, oh, the data is the same, or sorry, the data is different, but I'm still analyzing things. It's just different data. So it kind of gave me more fodder in my CV and my interviews, and it gave me a lot of practical experience, and I just learned a lot from working with the other fellows. So like after the fellowship, I was hired by Ph.D. and I've been there for about a year and a half now. And you know, they encouraged me to give talks, and they would love if we published. But you know, I want to say that one thing that really helped me was that I had a friend who had also made the transition out of academia, and she told me that she had no regrets, even though she like left her first job or like got let go from her first job after academia. She's like, I don't regret it. So now I'm being that friend to you and saying, I have no regrets. If you're already thinking it now, you're not going to have any regrets. It is hard getting that first job after academia, but once you're over that hump, you know, you will get over the hump and it'll be fine. And, you know, also like Mary said, don't use your CV. You need to make it into a resume. But, you know, you could keep your CV information like in LinkedIn so that people can see how well-rounded you are. So like, most importantly, this brings me to what I wanted to really talk about, which is like how you can use the skills you've gained in academia to market yourself. I think what you need to do is like think really big picture about what you liked about academia and what you were good at. So, you know, like communicating science, that's a really big thing. It's really important that I'm able to communicate data science topics and like findings to the sales team, for example, who, you know, they don't know what like a classification, you know, like a random forest classification model is really, and like, unless I explain what it is. And I have to explain it in terms that are not boring too. Another thing is like, you know how to solve problems, you know how to ask questions and find out whether the questions you're asking are even the correct questions to ask. And like Luke said, you know, you learn what you need to get a project done. I felt that a lot of, you know, graduate school was doing that as well. And so, you know, I would always say like, if I don't know how to do it, I know how to figure it out. And I'm not afraid to ask questions and go other places to figure out how to get it done. The other thing is that like, you know, you might have had a lot of fieldwork experience, so you like the logistics of that. Or, you know, in my job, it's really important that I have this anthropology background, because when I'm working with big data and like, you know, I'm deciding how the machine learning model is going to use it, you know, because of my anthropology background, I'm like, well, like if I have a gender or a sex, a feature that's indicating gender or sex, I better make sure that the machine learning model is not thinking this is a continuous feature where like one sex is better or has a higher number value than the other. I better make sure the model is thinking it's a categorical value, because I don't want to introduce bias into the model by accident. So, you know, like just think big picture, what you like and what you could do well, and you can really come up with parallels between what you've learned as an academic and what you could do in whatever position that you want to do outside of academia. I think one thing that was lucky is like my boss and the people at my job, a lot of them have a background in academia, and they thought that what I worked on was really cool. So it wasn't like I had to be like ashamed or like make excuses for it. And, you know, obviously having the fellowship experience really helped, because, you know, you do this data science project and then you deploy it on a website. And so you have a working example of something marketable that you've done. So I think that overall, I just want to say that like I don't have regrets. It wasn't an easy transition, but I'm really happy I did it, and it was definitely worth the time and effort. And you know, any struggles I had, which were mostly with making a website from scratch, which I don't have to do as a data scientist now, but I now understand what people go through to do that. And no, I'm not talking about Wix, but anyway, yeah. So I hope that we can answer some of your questions and that you feel free to ask whatever questions you want. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle, would you like me to just start going through the questions, or did you have any wrap up that you wanted to do before that?
Let's start with questions, and then we'll wrap up at the end.
Okay. We do have a lot of questions, which is great, and we'll go through these. And if we have some that we don't get to, we'll make sure that they're shared with Michelle and the overall webinar series organizer so that they can feed the questions to the appropriate people and get answers back to you. Okay, the first one is, this one was typed in, Luke, when you were presenting. It says, I've heard some horror stories about grad students not being supported by their advisors or departments once they decided they wanted to pursue a career outside of academia once finishing their PhD. Did you find any challenges in talking to your academic advisors about seeking jobs outside of academia? And if so, how did you approach these conversations? That's really for everybody, but we want to start.
Yeah, just say in my case, I think that's really going to vary by the committee or by the advisor. When I was doing my PhD, I didn't particularly envision doing this route, although maybe I had some inklings, but at any rate, I never raised it. I didn't, you know, I guess I did talk to professors I knew. I mean, that's probably how I found the startup job. I talked to professors I knew when I was during my postdoc, who I kind of knew were open to that possibility. But I mean, I agree, there are some individuals who are not open to that. So the people who were, I think, were helpful and supportive. The people who aren't, I don't think you're gonna convert them.
Anyone else have comments on that one?
I would say that I really lucked out with my supervisory committee at the Free University of Amsterdam. Because for one, so I had two supervisors and two co-supervisors, and my supervisor, Henk Kars, who unfortunately passed away, he was very active in trying to get me to expand my network and meet different types of people, and you know, gain the skills that I needed to answer the questions that I had. And you know, I had very different relationships with each of my supervisors and co-supervisors. With one co-supervisor, I had you know, it was a very much a teacher-student kind of relationship, and I just lucked out, I have to say. And I hope, you know, I hope more supervisors are listening to this. I hope they appreciate how much influence they have on their students' lives and futures, and they just are a bit more, yeah, a bit more, you know, easygoing, a bit more understanding of the fact that wherever your students go, they'll always reflect on you. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be in academia. They can shine in other fields. So, yeah, I hope somebody's listening to that.
Great, thank you. The next question says, for anyone with children and partners, Was it easier to balance personal life and academic or personal life and other careers? So, Whitney?
It's definitely easier to balance personal life with outside of my career outside of academia. But with that said, I purposely chose a role at a place where I wasn't going to be traveling a lot or, working on major deadlines all the time. Like I said earlier, I wanted a job where I could not really think about it in the evening or on the weekends unless there was a project that had to be done, which is very rare. So your mileage may vary, but I don't, yeah, it's basically, it depends what job you decide to take outside of academia. Oops.
I'd like to just weigh in on that quick. I have kids, 3 kids now, but first one came during my postdoc. But I think the hours working, the balance for me of hours working versus hours of the family was pretty similar, like whether I was working in industry or academia. I didn't notice a big shift there. I think a big issue was the kind of level of travel to conferences and so forth. So even beyond the field work in my case, and then the kind of degree of relocation needed to find the next job, right? Like the next postdoc or the next professorship. So for me, that part of the balance was much better in industry. And I mean, I remember going to the BCG, so that's Boston Consulting Group, kind of orientation thing, and then leaving there and thinking like Whitney did, like, oh no, I can't do this. I don't want to be wheels up 2 weeks a month, flying here and there. That's what I'm not, looking for.
Great. Mary? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'll also add a little bit about my experience. Just disclaimer, I don't have kids or family, but I could still speak to that work-life balance. And specifically, I think sometimes it also depends on how much you want to take on if you choose these non-traditional routes. So in my case, I kind of want it all. Still feel like that right now. I'm sure soon it'll just really wear me out. But I'm teaching, and at community colleges, you actually can teach more courses and significantly increase your salary with your overload. And there's no expectation for you to publish or pursue an active research program. But if that was your dream and you want to pursue it, you can. But then you now are doing overload and research and running this program, right? That sort of requires you to interface with people on a regular basis during regular work hours. Whereas I think in academia sometimes you can choose your own schedule to a certain extent. And another thing about it is that community colleges tend to be the model is a little different. Like I felt like we're treated more like staff than we are like faculty. So there's some expectation that you have to be on campus during certain hours, or almost like clocking in and out. And there are certain college mandates that you have to abide by. And faculty are always pushing back. So I have an active role on the Senate executive committee because I'm passionate about fighting for faculty rights. But it's so I don't have a life sometimes, it feels. But it's only because I've chosen to try to do all that now, especially since I don't have that obligation to, let's say, caring for little ones. Well, I have my furry ones, but so anyway, for what that's worth, I guess it sort of depends.
Right. This is an interesting one. So this is talking about starting a little earlier. It says, for current grad students who aren't sure if they want to stay in academia or pursue a job outside of academia, is there anything we should keep in mind as we design our dissertation research?
I mean,
I don't see any hands going up. I see a lot of pondering. There we go, Whitney.
I think that's a great question and a difficult question to answer. But what I'd say is you should keep in mind, like I said earlier, what are the big picture things that you really like about graduate school? What are the skills that you are learning that, advisor, Leslie, like really stressed, like, you know, science communication and outreach. And so I had a lot of opportunities to do that. And, you know, that was really helpful. And I knew I liked doing that. So, you know, maybe if there are things that you really like doing and you can think of how they would translate to a role in industry or outside academia, or, you know, potential roles that you would like in industry, then you can work backwards and retranslate them into academia and think about components of your dissertation that you could add that would support those, and then look really good on your CV later on. You know, whichever route you choose, you'll have a few different things.
I have a few thoughts. I mean, one, I mean, if you can do it in a timely enough manner, like don't spend 9 years doing the PhD, but assuming you can do it in a timely enough manner, I would still encourage you to finish, because I think that the PhD does still look good, even in private industry. When I was interviewing with people, like they have two equivalent kind of people, you know what I mean? And one maybe has more years of experience. They still look at the PhD and they're like, this person accomplished something. Like, I don't even care what the PhD was about. Like they finished something, right? So I think there is a value just to that. And I think building on what Whitney said, yeah, like think about how you could just acquire the skills you're going to need or demonstrate that you have those skills. So like, I know some other friends who have done this, like they initially did some kind of like just really one-off consulting, freelancing type gigs for nonprofits or various people who needed some data analysis done or needed a survey run, but they did it in a way that it was okay to like talk about it afterwards or show some results, right? And so it shows some applied thing that you did with the kind of similar background. Like it's not like a steady job at first, is what I mean, right? I mean, and some of us, like when I went to my startup, we had 12 employees who are just like burning money, basically. Like we didn't sell much at first. It's okay. It's okay to like start small that way. You can do that while you're still, I think, you know, you could do a little consulting on the side. I at one point did some pro bono work for my alma mater, analyzing survey data they had.
Yeah, likewise.
I would say, sorry.
Oh, no. Please, Linda, go ahead.
Linda?
Oh, okay, thank you. I would say, well, it's a bit of a balance, right? You know the skills that you want to build and build on, and you know perhaps where that you want to be marketable in the job market. But at the same time, you know, when you do a PhD, it has to be something that you can wake up in the morning for. Like, it's really hard. So if you don't have that love and that passion when you're waking up in the morning, even when you feel like, you know, your data set isn't as big as it needs to be, or you're behind on your research plan, you know, you need something that'll be like, okay, I'm gonna keep going. And so you have to balance that a bit. So yeah, when like I say, when you design your dissertation, I'm not quite sure how it works in the Netherlands, but I had quite a lot of freedom when I was designing my research, and yeah, it, like I said, it's a project that I was very passionate about, and you know, the Netherlands is a cold, wet country, and I needed a reason to wake up in the morning and you know, go to that basement and do all those analyses that I needed to do. So there's that, and also, well, in my case, while I was, like Luke was saying, while I was a PhD student, I did do some freelance work as an academic editor, and I had a very understanding chief editor. She was very yeah, she understood my time constraints and what have you, and also helped me like pick and choose the type of assignments that I wanted to do, so to gain the kind of experience that I wanted. So yeah, I think what Luke says is a good way to bulk up your CV and kind of, maybe if you feel like you have gaps or, gaps in skills or gaps in time, that's a good way to go about it.
Great.
Sorry, I just wanted to pipe in and say, oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
That I don't think I could have done a consulting job on the side while I was trying to finish my PhD. And so don't feel like if you feel that you can't do teaching or a research position and finish your dissertation like I was doing, like either teaching or a research position plus my dissertation, I could not have taken on something else. So don't feel like you could never get a job in industry if you can't do that. You can finish your PhD and then focus on the job in industry. I realize that part of this is like, like I had the resources available to me so that I could focus on studying after my PhD and I didn't have a part-time job right after it. So I know that I'm speaking from not the same perspective as everyone, and I was very lucky for that. But I just wanted to say, don't feel like, oh my God, I can never be something else because I can't take on anything else right now in addition to my PhD.
Okay. We're getting close on time. The one question we've had the most of is for you, Whitney. It says, what was the name of the fellowship that you mentioned? So if you could repeat that, a lot of people are interested in that one.
It's the Insight, INSIGHT, Data Science Fellowship. And you should take Andrew Ng's machine learning course because that'll help you get in, I think, yeah.
Great, thank you. We also had a bunch of people, this isn't a question specifically, but with this same thought, it says, thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your story. It's so helpful to hear your journey, especially with regard to your mental health. It's so important to normalize our health and discussions of these types of concerns. So a lot of people expressed appreciation on that as they've struggled too. Let's see. Let's see if we can get one more question in here, and then Michelle, will turn it over to you for the wrap up. How about this one? It says, how common are part-time postdocs? Was it a specific position? This one is actually says it's for Linda specifically. Was it a specific position that the PI was looking for, or an arrangement made specifically for your situation?
Well, in my case, I actually was recruited by the Vice Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, and yes, he went on a drive to recruit postdoctoral fellows, and he described it quite honestly. He said, yes, postdocs are the hardest workers and the cheapest employees. So then I had the freedom to kind of look at the departments where I thought that I would fit in best. And yeah, it's been quite a blessing. I can imagine that it's not everyone who has the flexibility that I've had. But I suppose with that flexibility perhaps comes with, lower pay, I think. So yeah, give and take.
Okay. I'm going to try to sneak in one more here. It says, what might be a good way to transition to data science if something like the Insight Fellowship isn't an option? So another path.
I think just a lot of self-directed learning, and establishing an account on GitHub and working on projects from beginning to end. There are also other fellowships, and if you can do any volunteer analyses or consulting work, just like on your own as a freelancer. Or even, you know, maybe you can get a job as an analyst and then work your way up to being a data scientist. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that for my statistical analysis for my thesis, you know, there were some unique considerations that you know, SPSS just wasn't cutting it. So I taught myself R, and I got pretty proficient at it. And once I broke through that barrier, then I started to actually really love statistics. So then I kind of just through talking with my colleagues and my friends who finished grad school who needed help, I started to just kind of collaborate or help out with analyses, and just sort of ventured out to like create my own algorithms for different things. And so, but you have to kind of, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm gonna just play around with it. Like commit to actual projects, or you're collaborating with somebody, and as Whitney pointed out, like that you see it through by maybe like volunteering to do something where you actually have to, you're forced, you're not just like playing around with it, but you're forced to achieve an outcome, because that will get you to really learn it thoroughly, where you could feel comfortable enough when you're applying for this position to say, I have those skills. But that actually did help me like get a few consulting gigs. Didn't pay great, but like it was a nice start. And then I agree with your comments about the analyst position. So there were actually quite a few marketing analyst positions that I applied for, and one that I was actually close to getting, because okay, I wasn't really excited about marketing per se, but the job itself was cool, like looking at the data and pulling out trends and gaining more skills in the process that then like might get me to that point where I'm working with big data. I already was a little familiar with it since my sister is a data analyst for Google, so she helped coach me a little bit for those interviews. But in the end, I just realized, like, since teaching was still a passion, I went that other route. But yeah, you should seek out like these unique opportunities and really put your effort into them. It may seem like, well, I'm just sitting here wasting time when I could be having a job, but if you actually kind of treat it like a job itself, or you're going to learn this to achieve this outcome, and like, yeah, do it for real, you know, I think it'll pay off personally.
Great. Okay, so Michelle, let me turn this back over to you. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions. We had almost 300 people on the call today, and a lot of them had questions. So I will forward those, Michelle, to you and to Leslie, and we'll see if we can follow up with some of them perhaps. But anyway, so.
Okay, I think we have a final slide. Yeah. So, okay, thank you so much to the panelists and those of you who asked questions. As Brett said, we had many more questions than we had time, and this really reflects what a critically important conversation this is. I think it's important at all times, but especially in these uncertain times. We have a second webinar series starting on August 17th, and you can see the information on the slide. You can watch in your email inbox for more information on this, and you can check the physance.org website. So really, thank you to everyone who came today. A big thank you to our panelists. This was incredible. And I couldn't have anticipated how nice this would be. Also, just one final thing, if you're not a member of the AAPA or you need to renew your membership, this is a really good time to do that. Your support helps the AAPA support you. So thank you everyone for attending, and thanks to our panelists.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Michelle.